So I'd like to thank everybody for registering and coming to participate in this conversation this evening that's being presented by the Leadership and Social Responsibility Interest Group at the School of Mines. We look forward to hearing, really about how engineers are able to engage in society and in challenges that face us as a global community that we can make a difference in. And it's great. We've got great leadership with Joey Tucker. We have Bob Hedlund here tonight to share his experiences. Please stay engaged in the call, and when you have the opportunity, please participate in the discussion because that really is what makes these types of interaction most fruitful for everybody. With that, I want to introduce Joey Tucker. He is the chair of our Leadership and Social Responsibility Interest Group, a Mines graduate. And with that, please take it away, Joey.
Thank you, Andy. I'd like to express my thanks to Andy and the alumni staff, as well as the foundation, for the support that they give to this effort, because without them, we wouldn't have near the effective communications and support and scheduling that's needed for these sort of things. So I want to introduce Bob Hedlund. I'm proud to say Bob and I were classmates together many a year ago at School of Mines. Bob came to my awareness through a mutual friend who is recently retired from the mining department, and introduced me to the fact that Bob transitioned a career from mining into a very successful non-governmental development organization devoted to empowerment, support, capacity building in Central Asia, especially among the more vulnerable populations. And with that, I'm going to quit talking and I'm going to turn it over to Bob and tell us about this incredible journey and some of the work that they've done. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Joey. Thank you, Andy, for inviting me. This is going to be a great opportunity for me to share some of the great things that have been happening in the last 30 years. It's hard to believe it's been 30 years, but that's what happens when you're having fun. The years just go by. So I'm going to share my screen. Hope everybody will be able to see it. Thank you all that have signed on virtually. Hopefully there'll be more that will join us. But I want to talk about how I transitioned my career from mining gold to what I call finding hearts of gold. Yes, this is how I describe the last half of my life as I transitioned my career from US to life in Central Asia and the Middle East, a career much different than what I graduated with from mines. Tonight, I want to share mostly by pictures, our work in Central Asia and the Middle East, how my life and career took on a whole new dimension. I'll share ideas of how engineering professionals in their careers can influence corporations to take or make simple steps to influence lives through simple development concepts. Most of what I share could easily be funded by multinational corporations that are in these very hard access regions. And I also share how helping can actually hurt. So I am a mines grad from 1975, and the education I had at Mines has helped me to become I think, a better problem solver and not to be afraid of embracing new challenges. So the last 30 years, I think there's probably very few years that I haven't been challenged with something new. So most of my early life was in the mining town of Telluride. My father was a graduate from Colorado School of Mines, and all I knew was mining life. He was the general manager of the Eldorado mine, which is one of the largest mines in operation during the late 50s, 60s, and 70s. I started from selling ore and crystal specimens to tourists in the summer, touring mines around Telluride, and I knew that I wanted to become a mining engineer and follow my father. I worked in the Eldorado mine after I turned 18, and during the summers, during the CSM breaks, I took 1 year off at mines to work in the mine. In this picture, if you could go underground, you could see more than 300 miles of mine workings. This was a tremendous area in the San Juan Mountains. We lived very close to the Eldorado mill, and I still remember hearing the ore cars coming out the portal and the man trips as they came for shift change. After graduation, I, like many CSM mining graduates, earned their stripes in underground uranium mine in New Mexico. I was fortunate enough to get a job, but wasn't even fortunate. You didn't have to do much to get a job in New Mexico. I got a job with Kerr-McGee, Section 17, and I started as a very, very green shift boss, overseeing 30 very well experienced miners. And I thought I was a superhero because I was overseeing them all. From there, I transitioned to just north of Golden. Many people don't even know about this mine, the Schwarzwälder mine. It was the nation's highest grade uranium mine, mining uranium pitch blende, which was in the granites and gneisses vein deposits. A janitor from Colorado School of Mines found this uranium deposit in the mid-1950s. His name was Fred Schwarzwälder. Great story about him and how he found it. As chief engineer, we ran an internship program with junior and senior CSM mining students. We gave them real engineering tasks. I eventually became the general manager of this operation. The portal going into the mine. Underground, we transitioned from track haulage to load haul dumps. And then I transitioned to open pit mining in central Nevada, just outside of Battle Mountain. Here I finalized all of the exploration, environmental permitting, mine planning, development and production. I became the general manager of this operation within 6 months. The final permitting, we were breaking rock and building our leach pads. The first gold came off the leach pads through our cyanide activated carbon tanks. This was a tremendous challenge, just getting all of this up and running within 6 months. Mining is always a challenge and always a place to learn new ways and new techniques. As you look at this picture, way down here on the bottom, this is 1,000 feet below the operation is where we had our water well to provide all of the water for our leaching pads and our processing. There was one morning that I went down there just to inspect it to make sure there weren't any major boulders coming off of the waste dumps. I looked up and saw everything that what I thought I had done. And I felt that I was challenged by God to consider doing something else with my life. I had no idea what that was, but I really sensed that he was speaking to me and wanted me to do something different. I went home and told my wife about it. She was flabbergasted, more than flabbergasted. She started crying, saying, you know, mining is your life. That's what I know. That's my security. How can you do anything besides mining? Well, I gave 2 months notice to my mining company. And I also asked them to send me to Uzbekistan to take a look at mining opportunities that might be available from this brand new nation that just broke away from the Soviet Union. This was in 1992. So again, I love embracing challenges. In 1992, I took my family there, looking for mining opportunities. And within this opportunity, I met many high-ranking government officials. They became some of my best friends. And I knew right away that I was in the right place. I can't say my wife or my kids believe that, but they eventually grew to love it. I loved it from the very beginning just because of the challenge. Government officials took me to some of the most impoverished and environmentally destroyed places in the country. I saw poverty and incredible need for the very first time in my life. I can say that this transition was not easy, but rewarding as we met so many wonderful people. So JDA, Joint Development Associates, is not an aid organization. Instead, we are a development organization catalyzing transformational development, what I call catalyzing transformational development, by supporting and implementing projects that are inspired by local communities. Our employees are predominantly local people who have expertise, or we end up training people to work in our projects themselves. I believe that poverty is not a lack of resources. There's a lot of organizations that want to dump a lot of money into poverty, and they think just by giving money or resources to the poor people, that'll solve poverty. But I believe that poverty is really about the lack of mental resources, the lack of freedom to imagine, to theorize, to conceptualize, to experiment, to invent, to articulate, to organize, to manage, and to solve problems. It's a mental resource to discover really the hidden things of creation, to develop new resources. It's what I loved about mining, especially underground mining. You can always go under where there's a brand new drift or stope being blown up, and you go in there after the charge, and you're always looking for something new that was placed there by the creator. Our first project was bringing a group of engineers to look at how to mitigate a major oil spill. Some of these men were from CSM, Dr. Roger Olson. Maybe some of you know him. He was on the team. He's became one of my board members and has been a board member for my organization for the last 30 years. Our mission is JDA believes that all people have unlimited creativity and potential for transformation, and in that spirit, JDA joins the people and their communities in developing holistic solutions that affect fundamental progress toward a more equitable society. We support locally integrated solutions, government development, community development, education, health, agriculture, and economic growth. Now, this was what I learned in humanitarian course 101 in 1970. Actually, there was no course in CSM on any of this. So this was a steep learning curve for me to start this organization, but I believe that it was something that we love doing and I love doing. Some of our excellent strategic points were in poverty alleviation, agriculture development, community health education, water development, infrastructure repair and construction, and humanitarian aid. I'll be going over a lot of these activities today. Hopefully I have enough time to do this and still have time for questions. So this is our location, Uzbekistan in Central Asia, and just below that, Afghanistan. In Uzbekistan, we had 8 field offices from Tashkent, where our home was and our headquarters, all the way to the east in the Fergana Valley, all the way to the west in the Aral Sea Basin. Aral Sea Basin was just a marvelous place to work, to see the degradation that the Russians, the Soviet Union did to destroy this fourth largest major sea in the world, and what it did to the people. Uzbekistan has 34.2 million people, the size of California. One of our very first projects, long-term projects, this was a 7-year project, was in leprosy. I learned leprosy in my sophomore year at Mines. I think it was leprosy 201. I think if that was a course. Actually, there was no course at Mines for leprosy. So it was a very, very steep learning curve to do this. It's a long story how this dropped into our lap, but it was a very, very effective program. The Ministry of Health quarantined anybody that had leprosy. There were 2 large leprosarium, what we call leprosariums in the country. And people that had been there for 50, 60 years had never seen their family. They were isolated there for the rest of their lives. We trained over 500 doctors in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan for detection, diagnosis, treatment, prevention, and care. But we were also partnered with the World Health Organization, Leprosy Mission in the UK, Leprosy Mission of India, Leprosy Mission of Nepal. And there were these doctors that came in and provided the expertise for all of our programs. WHO gave us the new leprosy treatment medications. First time in the country that there were actually medications for leprosy. Leprosy is 100% curable with 6 months of treatment. If you catch it early, it has no effect on your body. The Ministry of Health, and especially the minister himself, called me Dr. Hedlund, just because I ended up knowing so much about leprosy, and we brought in all of these doctors. I never did tell him that I was a mining engineer. We were required to wear white robes and white hats whenever we went into these leprosy centers. The doctors were deathly afraid of leprosy. They thought it was very, very contagious. Actually, leprosy is not very contagious at all. What I wanted to do with my organization was to go in there and actually learn to love these people, touch the people. They've never been touched. Some of them have been in these centers for 50 and 60 years and nobody's ever touched them. So that was our mandate, is to do that, as well as giving them instruction how to look over their body for wounds. Leprosy affects the nerves, and it's primarily when you lose the nerves on your digits, on your ears and your nose, infection sets in and you can't feel it because you don't have any nerves there. At the end of 7 years, the Ministry of Health changed the laws on leprosy and created a new law saying that if anybody that's in the leprosy centers could go home if there was any home left to go to. Anybody that was found with leprosy could stay at home and just take treatment through multi-drug therapy. And we also were able to create a new department in the Ministry of Health for leprosy. And we trained a chief leprologist in India and Nepal, and he became the head of this new department. So that was a great success story that we had to see this happen in leprosy. These are some of the patients that we treated brought in eye doctors, and they did perform surgeries on their eyes. Leprosy affects their eyes to where they can't close them. So these doctors performed surgery to allow them to be able to close their eyes. We gave them glasses. We just cared for them, took care of them. 1995, we had what's called Lepra 95. That was our large conference where we trained the 500 doctors in 4 different locations across Uzbekistan. One of our other major components in our program was drilling shallow wells in the Aral Sea Basin during a tremendous drought in the late 90s, early 2000s, we were able to put in 1,000 shallow wells in this basin, along with teaching sanitation and health education to more than 100,000 people in over 200 villages. We used cable tool drilling. This is all manual, where they just take a metal tube, raise it up and down, dropping it, and it goes down deeper and deeper. These were shallow wells, anywhere from 15 to 20 meters. And then we put hand pumps on them. Now we had another very effective program, microcredit. This ran for 7 or 8 years, lending less than $100 to help start a small business. Our largest loan was $360. At that time, $360 went a long way. Through carpet weaving, we had seminars for it. To join the program, you had to go through a 7-day training program. And what it did is equip the people to think differently about their own personal and mental assets and how they can use them to create wealth. When we went to Uzbekistan, we found that so many people just had no idea that they could do something themselves because of the command social structure of the Soviet Union. You could only do what your boss told you to do, only do what the government told you to do. They just had no way of doing anything on their own. We formed trust solidarity groups with 20 to 25 people. Each month, new health education instruction was given to this group where they made payments. We started with a loan fund of $30,000 in 1999. And by 2006, we'd given out over 3,000 loans and had dispersed $250,000 with just that $30,000 fund, just giving it out over and over and over. Loan repayment was just over 91%. Almost 70% of our loans were for women. We targeted women because we felt they had the best chance for having a successful small business. Here they were looking at the things that they know, the things that they can do with apples, with sheep, with chickens and fish, and how they might be able to create jobs with the knowledge that they have. We gave out 11 goats to families on credit. We also did many bread ovens. This is in a local community and in a gas-fired tandoor. This was a very successful business, many businesses like this in several of the villages. The other thing we did in microcredit was with broiler chickens. There was an initial investment of $10. JDA then provided 51-day-old chicks with feed. Feed was primarily soybeans or silkworms, high protein, vitamins, and training. And in 45 days, those chicks turned into 2.5 kilo birds. They would go to market. The family would then have profit 8 to 10 times what their investment was. We had almost 300 growers before my organization was shut down. We since learned that there was a lot of women-headed families in apartment buildings, so they took on the same program and created one room out of their apartment and grew chickens in their apartments. I'm not sure that this would be allowed in the US, but it was in Uzbekistan. These are some of the broiler birds who were almost ready for going to market. I did a little bit of mining in Uzbekistan. We found this high-grade gypsum deposit outside of one of our communities, and I had an engineer that was working for me. And he says, Bob, let's take the gypsum, let's start mining it. And it's just mining it with pick and shovel and bars, picking it up in trucks, taking it to their home. And they developed furnaces and burned it at high temperature. And we trained over 50 families doing this with our microcredit program, and they ground it to plaster of Paris. This little village became the gyps capital of Uzbekistan. Gyps was the word for plaster of Paris in Russian. This was a high-grade plaster of Paris. It was medical grade so that you could use it in the medicine. And by the time we finished our credit program there were 4 or 5 large trucks, dump trucks coming from Tashkent to all of these 50 millers to buy the gyps from them, take it back to Tashkent. Here's a few of our Uzbek dedicated staff. And now going to Afghanistan. Afghanistan, we started our operation in Afghanistan in 2001. We crossed the border right here in Termez. We had an office in Termez. We crossed the border across what was then known as the Friendship Bridge. It had been closed for almost 10 years by the Uzbek government, not allowing anybody to go across. Colin Powell came in and right after the Taliban was defeated and demanded from President Karimov that he open the bridge. And my organization was one of the first organizations to cross the bridge and start operations in northern Afghanistan. This is our location area in the red. Our main office was in Mazar-e Sharif, and we've been operating here now for 20 years. These are just some of the faces and places of Afghanistan, just to give you an idea of what it looked like in the early days, right after the Taliban had left. And just the great people, they were so friendly, they were so excited to have an American organization come and help them redevelop their nation. Every place I went, they were just so thankful to be there, but tremendous poverty. The camel loved posing for this picture. So when we got there, opium was one of the major products still. This is opium being scraped off of the opium bulb. It was very prevalent wherever we went, we would see opium farmers. By the year 2010, opium had been pretty well eradicated from the country. A lot of it was because of development projects, a lot of our projects creating better wealth for family members. It's a beautiful country. In the springtime, it's a great time to be in Afghanistan. High mountains in the Himalayas, eastern Himalayas, as well as the Hindu Kush mountain range. And this is a large sculptures on a roundabout in Mazar-e Sharif. Some of my staff, we loved going out doing picnics in the little forests. They love playing chess. They love playing cards. So when we started work in 2001, 90% of the women were illiterate. 40% of all men were illiterate. 1 of 4 children would die before the age of 5. Highest infant mortality rate in the world. 165 in the 1,000 children die the first year of their birth. 23% had access to safe water. 12% had access to adequate sanitation. 15% of the births were attended by trained health workers. It means 85% of the births were done in villages with no health workers present at all. 90% of all births take place at home. 54% of the girls under the age of 18 were married. And unfortunately, that's still even happening today. Some of our very beginning projects was just food distribution, giving out hundreds of tons of food that we got from the World Health Organization, from the UN, from private donors shipping in containers. We distribute it by donkey and small carts. I employed 15,700 men through food for work programs, rebuilding irrigation canals, rebuilding roads, making bricks for schools, rebuilding irrigation canals like this one. Then we started a housing project where we helped create jobs for 220 homes. We didn't pay anything to these workers. These were all mostly people that were going to be living in the homes. We provided the resource for it, and they did all the labor building the homes. Very, very interesting construction. All of these are handmade bricks. One of the first things that I did when I went there was to talk to elders or leaders in the villages to make sure that they would permit us to start working there. And this was me in the middle of it without the turban. And I was introducing a project to them about building a school. That was the very first thing that they asked me as an organization to come in and build schools, not just schools for boys, but they wanted schools for the women. So I gathered all of these. There was about 20 elders from 20 different villages here. And I had to ask them specifically, will you allow girls to attend the school if we build it? And they all agreed to that. So we started taking out construction material out to the remote villages, basically no roads in the springtime, lots of rain. We battled a lot of problems with the trucks getting stuck. This was a very typical school in an old house, girls sitting on the floor. This was actually a very nice house compared to some of the other schools that they were in. And then we started construction on this 26-room school building. And when it was finished, they had a dedication, and the entire community came out and lined up both sides of the road for almost a kilometer. And they made me walk down this all the way to the school while they clapped. It was very, very humbling to have such an honor. We did it out of the love for the people. And this was the school. Both boys go to school in the morning, girls go to school in the afternoon. Some of the children will walk, some of the teachers are walking 5 or 6 kilometers from the village just to attend the schools, the boys and the girls as well. This is the new classroom. We made all of the desks. Another school in Mimlik that we made. This was a smaller school, but we had a dedication here. These are all the village elders as well as all of the participants in the communities that children were going to be attending. Government officials were here dedicating the school. Agriculture became one of our largest projects in the country. When we first started there, the only thing they had for mechanization were ox. This is how they plowed the fields. This is how they did everything in the country. Very, very expensive to feed an ox in the wintertime when you're not doing any farming. In 2003, to try to find ways to feed our broiler chickens in Uzbekistan, I went to Laos to look at a soybean project there that they were growing soybeans in small villages. We ended up growing soybeans in Uzbekistan and in Afghanistan, but I found this 2-wheel tractor. It's a 15 horsepower. It comes with 4 different attachments. We ended up importing 500 of them from China found a manufacturer out there. One of my JDA board members went to China, looked at the manufacturer, found the best manufacturer in China, and we started importing these. This is the two-wheel tractor with a seeder. This is the seeder that will have any different types of seed in it, like mung bean or safflower or wheat. It tills, it seeds all at the same time. And here we're doing zero till, meaning that we are tilling in wheat. We're not turning the soil over, we're doing limited till, and it's very, very effective. This is what it looks like after it's irrigated. And this is our experimental farm. We have 7 acres that we developed, put in a shed. We've got a training center over here. And this was comparison of zero till with a tractor versus doing broadcast and tilling by hand on this side, showing you the major difference. So the yield, increased yield was phenomenal. And the farmers just loved what they saw with the two-wheel tractor. These are some of the tractors that we imported. We started a program similar to what we did in Uzbekistan, giving credit with a simple down payment. A farmer could take this, we would give them business training to show them how to use the tractors, how to use it as a business. And many, many farmers were able to pay off their tractors and have tremendous profit as a result of it. They ended up renting themselves out almost 8 hours to 10 hours a day to their friends, to different villages. And they were making, at that time, about $35 a day, which is about what a average laborer makes in a month. They were doing that in a day's time, $35 profit just by renting this out to their friends in other villages. We did training with this. This is a very typical training session. We trained over 200,000 farmers in use of two-wheel tractors and different varieties of wheat. In 2006 or 7, we shared what we were doing with two-wheel tractors with USAID, and they decided they liked the project. They took our recommendations and they started purchasing tractors from the same manufacturer in China. They imported 5,000 of these tractors and gave them away to farmers without any down payment, with no training, assuming that this was what was going to solve their poverty issues. What ended up happening is many of these two-wheel tractors got cannibalized for the engine on it, for the spare tires. Anything that could be sold in the market was sold, so that the people that were given the tractors not only got the tractor free, but then they were able to sell components of it and make money out of it. Terrible, terrible way that US government spends money. This is how it threshes, how it cuts the wheat. A typical hand threshing is 16 people, and it takes about a week for 2 hectares of land. We can do the same thing in less than 8 hours in the tractor. So tremendous savings of labor and cost. We developed this little tool here for making raised beds. That tool was actually tilling the land. It was seeding and also making raised beds at the same time. The tractor comes with a trailer, very typical of how you transport between villages. or use it as a taxi. And you charge for the use of it. We went out to the villages later and found out that they were actually manufacturing their own trailers and making them cheaper than what we were selling them for. Just the ingenuity of the Afghan mechanics. Later in the years, when we started doing bigger and bigger agriculture projects, the last 6 years, we had a $6 million project from USAID. We actually wrote our own project proposal. They funded it, but we wanted to do the development the way we wanted to and didn't want the USAID to show us how to do it. So we wrote our own project proposal, they funded it, and we started bringing in these laser land levelers. This saved 78% of the water that was mostly by flood irrigation. By leveling the land, it saved tremendous on the amount of water that was used, 78%. This became a very popular tool, and many farmers actually bought these on credit again, and going out just like the two-wheel tractor, going around to different farmers and villages, leveling their lands. These are some of the crops that we've, just a few of the crops of the many that we tested, that we experimented with. This is safflower. We brought in safflower from India. This is a spineless safflower so that you can hand thresh it without any spines on it. And it turned out to be almost all of the seeds from safflower we thought were going to be used within the country ended up going exported to UAE for their $20,000 or $30,000 birds for seed. Mung bean was another one, primarily a nitrogen fixer for the land. We follow mung bean with wheat because it puts nitrogen in the ground and the wheat then grows much better. We experimented with many different varieties of canola. 100% of the oil was imported from South Asia, and we wanted to create a local oil within the country, and now canola is grown many places around, and a lot of oil presses are developing now their own oil out of canola. Also sesame seed, we did a lot of different varieties of sesame seed, and wheat was the major thing. 99% of the wheat into the country starting in 2001 was imported from either Kazakhstan or Pakistan, and our project was trying to do the wheat value chain to where we grow the wheat, we take the wheat to the flour mill, create flour mill goes to the bakery goes to the store, the entire chain, trying to create a market for local wheat. We developed greenhouses, and this was strawberries. We noticed early on that there were a lot of strawberries coming from Pakistan. So we went to UC Davis, and they have strawberry research, and we brought in 10,000 runners from UC Davis and created our own strawberries in Afghanistan, and taught in our experimental farm, we grew the runners, and then we sold them to farmers, taught the farmers how to grow strawberries. And at the end of 2020, the markets were flooded with locally grown strawberries. Our water sanitation and hygiene WASH program started in 2009, primarily because there was just great need for water. This was very typical of water in the village, dirty, very dirty water. Again, using this type of drill, cable tool, but this is a mechanical cable tool. And these wells go down to 30 to 90 meters. With a hand pump, we did over 72 wells, 52,000 people in 70 villages. This was a 90-meter well. It's very difficult to pump because the pump is way down at the bottom and it takes many children to pump it. I have 35 women running my WASH program. We taught them how to drill wells. We taught them how to repair hand pumps. We taught them to train trainers in the villages. And this was one of my top trainers, Simo. She was training a group of men how a hand pump works. Then we went into the villages and we taught technicians how to take the pump apart and repair the pump. There were thousands of hand pumps installed from 2001 until about 2011. Most of them are not working any longer. It was a lot of large NGOs just ticking it off, saying we put a well in this village without training anybody how to repair the pumps. They put them too shallow, and they were thousands of them in all the villages are not operating. This is a hand dug well. This is for irrigation purposes. They dig down by hand. They put a diesel pump at the bottom, but they drill down deeper. Once they get down to this area, they use the drill again to go down another 30 or 40 meters, put a diesel suction pump on it, and this irrigates their land when they don't have stream or irrigation water. This is another device that we brought in. If we couldn't drill a well, we found this little filter. Osioham Korlik was a business that I started with two of my Afghan friends. They're now overseeing the entire operation. We used thousands of these filters in emergencies, after floods, after earthquakes, when the water supplies were completely damaged. The government came to JDA to ask for help because they knew that we had these filters. So where clean water was not available or could not be found by drilling, or it was just too deep to drill, these filters were used. We also used them in our women training, WASH training programs. We gave them out as a subsidized filter if they attended all of our training sessions. In the villages that used these, diarrheal diseases were almost entirely eliminated. This is a typical kitchen for a rural home, eating outside. Behind this curtain is a pit latrine, not even a pit latrine, just an open latrine. Terrible sanitation. So our ladies, 35 ladies, went out to the villages. They gathered the women together in groups of 20 to 25. Over 10 weeks, they trained them in sanitation and hygiene. It incredibly changed and transformed the villages. When you go back into the villages that were once strewn with debris, with fecal matter, were cleaned up by the women, getting their husbands out to clean up the villages because they knew that this was what causing all of their children illnesses. Did the same thing in schools with puppets. My local staff created the puppets created their own program, and we've taught thousands of children about sanitation and hygiene, and also using what we call the tippy pot, just a little oil canister with a little valve on it next to the latrine to wash their hands. And we created these hand washing areas in the schools. So this is the nature of transformational development. I believe it's a deeply rooted change in worldview, values, attitudes, actions, relationships, and structures. It's bettering the economic, political, social, and spiritual behavior. And it transforms individuals, families, communities, and nations. We saw individuals, families, and communities transformed. We haven't been at it long enough to see nations transformed, but I believe if we had the opportunity, we'd be able to see nations transformed as a result of our work, as our programs got larger and larger. This is an old Chinese proverb that everybody knows. You give a person a fish and he has food for a day. You teach a person to fish, he has food for a lifetime. This is where it pretty much ends, what we call development, but we've added another phrase to it. You empower a person to think about fishing in new ways, his life will be changed forever. And that's what we attempted to do with all of our programs, to get people to think about what they're doing differently, how to be creative, use their minds to just do new things with what they discover in the creation. Development is really nothing less than transformation of lives, families, communities, nations, and that such transformation will ultimately not depend just on money, technology, or technique, as will require new ways of thinking, fresh perspectives. These are some of my staff in Afghanistan. The 2020, I had 95 staff working for me, 35 women, the rest of them were agriculturalists. I've evacuated now 586 people out of Afghanistan. Almost all of these right here are now sitting in United Arab Emirates trying to get to the United States. And that's all I have. Just a real quick overview of what we've been doing for the last 30 years.
That's
we can,
Bob. I had no idea that you guys had been involved in so many programs and with so many people. Certainly a step away from the traditional mines experience. Let's go ahead and open it up for questions. And please go ahead and just direct your questions at Bob.
Bob, this is Kevin Moore, and I wonder if you could speak to having encountered or not encountered situations where what you were bringing forward perhaps was in conflict with cultural standards in the communities you were interacting with, and how that played out.
Yeah, very good question. We did everything as close as we could with the culture, always going first to the elders, to the government, to get permission to do anything, going into the communities, talking to community members before we started anything. But the biggest thing that happened to us was our microcredit program, because it became so successful and brought many people out of poverty. Government leaders, especially governors in communities, didn't like it because they lost power. The people no longer had to depend on the Hakim, or the Hakim as governor, no longer had to depend on the governor for help because they were helping themselves. And it was a governor of Moynock, which was way out at the Aral Sea. It used to have a fish plant producing 40,000 tons of fish a year, and they'd lost all of that. 100% were in poverty. And the governor didn't like it because we brought people out of poverty. And he's the one that ended up shutting down our program. He wrote letters to the governor or to the president, to the Council of Ministers in Tashkent. We had lots of hearings and eventually we were closed down. But not for cultural things, it was power structures.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
This is Juan. Can I ask a question here?
Yes.
So Bob, thank you very much for your presentation. I work with Kevin and Julia and Chuck and Beth in humanitarian engineering here at Mines, and I appreciate very much your presentation. I want to ask you something about the story that you told us today, and there was a bit of a contradiction here, because at the beginning of your presentation, you began saying that poverty was in large part due to the lack of mental resources of the people that you encounter. But then later in your presentation, you show the example of the tractors and how local innovation, they figure out multiple ways to use the tractors that you guys didn't intend them to use. So they use them as taxes, they use them as things to carry on, and they ended up actually fabricating their own tractors. So clearly there is no lack of mental resources in these people that you encounter. So help me understand a little bit about the way you started your presentation with the example that you gave later about the tractors.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. Yeah, what it is what we attempted to do was to catalyze transformation by their thinking, getting them to think new ways. So what you talked about, they were thinking about new ways how to use the tractor. Certainly there are resources that are necessary, but there are many organizations, including the USAID, that feels like they can dump money onto something and they're going to have success out of it. It's like the 5,000 tractors that came in. That's bad thinking. So we brought the tractors in knowing that they needed mechanization, and we taught them how to do it. We taught them how to do business with it. We gave them the opportunities to use it. We didn't give it away. We don't give anything away. They have to earn it or they have to pay for it, because once they have an investment into something, we know that they're going to do something with it and not throw it away. You can go into Afghanistan today, and every village, there's all sorts of Massey Ferguson tractors. There's tractors from Belarus, all sitting idle, cannibalized because there's no mechanics, there's no spare parts. So we brought in all of our spare parts. We are the only supplier of spare parts now in Afghanistan for these tractors. Well, of course, with the Taliban taking over, that is all shut down now. But that was a good question. Yes, thanks.
Hey, Bob, this is Bill Warfield.
Yes.
You know, this is just totally amazing. Like, you know, I knew you in Nevada, and I knew that you had gone overseas. In talking with your brother, I think that he was kind of along the same lines as your wife initially with, you know, what in the hell is my brother doing? Kudos to you for making a success of this. After all of this, what are you doing now? I know with all the geopolitical changes and everything that's in that part of the world, you know, what do you see? What are you doing? What do you see, you know, your organization doing now?
Yeah, what I didn't share was our work in Iraq. We started work in Iraq in 2017, and I have operations there that we're working with the Yazidi group. The Yazidis were incredible, ancient group of people that have been in northern Afghanistan, northern Iraq for years and years. They were heavily persecuted by ISIS. We've been rebuilding homes there, doing irrigation projects, rebuilding projects, agriculture projects there. Most of my time right now is spent on resettlement of Afghans that I evacuated out of Afghanistan. October 20th, I chartered 2 planes out of Mazar-e Sharif and brought them to Abu Dhabi. They're now sitting in a camp in Abu Dhabi, hopefully going to be processed by the US government and brought to the US. And now I've started a resettlement agency to resettle some of these in Denver and resettle some in Grand Junction. We brought in our first family last Sunday into Grand Junction. So there's I didn't learn from Mines anything about resettlement or rescuing Afghans either. I never thought I'd be doing that.
You know, there's a lot of things that we do that they didn't teach us at Mines, but they gave us the basic knowledge of how to do things and how to
Yes.
approach problems.
That's right.
Well, congratulations. I think you're doing a wonderful job, and I admire you.
Thanks.
Bob, we've had a question pop up in the chat box, and it was, what specifically drew you to the work abroad and specifically Central Asia, as opposed to doing projects here? I mean, obviously there are plenty of vulnerable people and vulnerable groups here in our own backyard.
Yeah, I didn't explain that. That was a process of time where my wife and I, after quitting my mining company, we went to visit her family, my family. They thought we were both families thought we were crazy, giving up a very lucrative mining career. My father-in-law convinced me that and he was going to give me $100,000 to start my own business if I would find a Dunkin' Donuts to operate. So to honor him, I went to Eugene, Oregon, under the auspices of Dunkin' Donuts. They had one that they wanted to sell me, and I looked at the economics of it, and I just could not see how 2% return would cover anything for my family. But during that process of visiting families, we started seeing more and more periodicals of like Newsweek and Time and the newspapers talking about these breakaway republics. And one of them was Uzbekistan. And that's, as we both, Kathy, so to be honest with you, I'm a Christian. I became a Christian at Mines my first year. And that's really what's motivated me the most. Kathy and I prayed about it, and that's where we felt that God told us to go, to put that into a very simple story. And that's how we went to Uzbekistan. And my mining company paid for my way there. I didn't say that I also looked at lots of mining properties when I was there, but they were way too large for the little company that I was representing. We were there before Newmont, and Newmont offered a lot of support for our organization. Became good friends with Newmont.
So Bob, just a question, not anything other than that, as just, I mean, do you still embrace, the value of mining to society? I mean, as compared to just, the humanitarian work of it. I mean, is there any dichotomy there?
Dichotomy between mines and development work?
Between mining.
Mining, I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Mining is a tremendous resource. We can't do without mining. Mining is what gives us almost everything we have. I just love what I do. I would probably go back to mining if I wasn't doing what I'm currently doing. I don't plan on retiring. I hope to continue doing this for as many years as I can.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and then understanding, and mining is very important to all societies. But so one of the other questions I had was this: with this being a really highly volatile part of the world right now, I mean, how are you protecting your staff and carrying on your mission?
Iraq is still very safe. Not doing anything in Uzbekistan now. We got closed by the government in 2008. Primarily, we were one of the last organizations shut down. We lost our microcredit program because of the power play that I talked about. But in 2006, there was a riot and protests in eastern Uzbekistan for businessmen. President Karimov went in there with the military, killed over 100 businessmen. All they were doing was just protesting the right to have profits. He killed them. President Bush at the time wanted to have an independent analysis of the whole thing. Karimov said no. It stopped all of the activity that the US had in the country. They closed down the embassy. They threw out all of the embassy workers, dropped all of their visas. The Peace Corps was shut down. And gradually, one after another, all of the NGOs were shut down. So I tried to go back to Uzbekistan. I was last in Uzbekistan in 2008. I tried every year to get a visa to go back there, and they kept denying it. Finally, 2 years ago, I tried again after 11 years, and they finally allowed me to go back in. So we haven't been doing anything in Uzbekistan since the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan. I've stopped all of the operations there, and all of my excellent staff are now in Abu Dhabi, evacuated because we are a US organization and also US funded. They're very high risk. The Taliban is looking for those type of individuals because they don't like them. I'd still be in Afghanistan if we had the opportunity and the freedom to do it. We were working almost entirely in very rural areas of Afghanistan, and starting in 2011, the Taliban started taking over most of the rural areas. And just in the last 2 years, it became more and more evident that we couldn't continue operations in those rural areas because of the Taliban takeover. Iraq is safe, and we're looking for funding there. Yeah, the greatest thing I would talk about with this group is organizations like Exxon and Chevron and that have oil properties or oil programs in these countries. Look for organizations like ours to help fund. We could do social programs for you to make an impact with your funds. I know that a lot of you are trying to do that, but it's really hard unless you have, I can't call myself an expert. I've learned a lot through this. I continue to learn, but there's plenty of opportunities to give $30,000 loan fund. That grew to $250,000. That's real high return on your investment.
Thank you, Bob. I think your work is really, really, truly appreciated.
Andy, how are we doing on our time commitment?
So we're at 7:13, and really it's just anyone else with closing questions, and then we'll go from there.
Bob, where are you based at now? Where are you living?
Grand Junction, Western Slope.
Great place that it is.
Yeah.
So
I mean, not a question, but sorry,
Oh,
but
sorry,
Bobby,
go ahead.
this is a statement, Bob. This is Bill Zish. Our paths I don't think have crossed, but I was responsible for Uzbekistan for Newmont for several years.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, the comment that you just made, I think is our learnings from there and places like Peru and Ghana, which is to partner with some of these
Yes.
groups, partner with these NGOs. And I think that's where a lot of our major companies fails. They try to do it themselves rather than use the
Yes.
tools, methods, skills, and abilities like you've demonstrated. So I think marrying the two is
Yes.
really what we need to do in the future. But a lot of kudos to you for what you've done, but more than that, how you've done it and what you've learned in the process. And that's what some of us should take away from it.
Yeah. So Newmont asked us one time to come into one of their cities in eastern Uzbekistan. They had a ancient gold copper mine that they were reestablishing. I forgot, Ongren, I think.
There's, yeah, right.
And there were like 45,000 people employed in this operation. Newmont wanted to downsize to 5,000. They wanted JDA to come in and try to find jobs through microcredit for 40,000 people. And there is no way that we could do this with, but that was a good, we had a good relationship that way. They gave us a lot of expertise that way, but we just couldn't do that job. That was way too big for us.
If it's okay, I would like to ask one final question. If we have time.
Sure. Yes.
So Bob, you told us a beautiful story of how you found your path into what we call humanitarian engineering. You almost have like an epiphany where God spoke to you and basically show you the way to go forward from the point where you were in your career at that point. But not all of our students have that opportunity, whether it's because they have different religious beliefs, because they might not be in the right place at the right time. So what kind of recommendation or insights do you have for people who might not be of the Christian faith as you are, to find their pathway into humanitarian engineering that might be different than the way you found it?
Definitely, you don't have to be a Christian to do what I'm doing. I've had many young people come to my organization in Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. I work with them. They become part of our program. In 2006, I was working with the EPICS group, and we were going to send 30 people to Uzbekistan, or bring 30 people to Uzbekistan for a project that I have. Great opportunity for young people to come alongside organizations like mine to learn, to find out if this is something that they want to do. But I was hoping to bring this EPICS group. Most of them were students, and I think 12 or 13 professors were going to come with this. And that was the same year that I got shut down. But that was a real exciting time that we were going to do. I'd found a chalk deposit on the bottom of the Aral Sea, and there was no school chalk in the entire country. And I challenged the EPIC class to come up with the best way to make school chalk. And we judged the things that they created, and I chose one, and we were going to take that one over, and we were going to start using it and create school chalk in Moynock, using the Aral Sea chalk with some talcum powder and other things to make it stronger. But that was all part of School of Mines, and I love doing that. That would have given these students an incredible opportunity to have experience like that.
Bob, I want to thank you for taking the time and effort to put this presentation together and spending your valuable time with the group tonight.
Sure.
I want to thank the people on the call for having devoted their time to show their support of the LSR group and appreciation of Bob's efforts. So you obviously have many other things you can share with us, and we may tee you up for a future appearance in the future sometime. But Bob, thank you very much, and congratulations on the successes, and best wishes for continuation.
You bet. Thank you. It was real fun. I really enjoy doing this.
All right, everyone.
Thank you, Bob. And I just want to say that, not for just those that are on this call, but those that will have a chance to see this presentation. It's a true a testament to just the goodness of yourself and how you've taken your engineering knowledge and really made a difference in this world. And I think that myself and others, truly appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone. And as the chair, I'll adjourn the meeting for tonight. And thanks again, Bob.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Joey.
much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Take care.